Hello, everybody. It is I, your friendly neighborhood INFP, and welcome back to another episode where we're going to be looking at the Star Child, Wonder Child, Far Child, the INFJ. These types are said to be the rarest MBTI types out there, though some debate could be said as to whether or not the ENTJ is rarer than the INFJ, causing a massive battle to erupt. And considering the massive influx of INFJs that I've seen on the internet, one must question, are there really that little INFJs out there, or are they all simply mistyped? I don't know. I'm just here to talk about INFJs. So, INFJs are typically the types of people who, although they're in the situation, they are distant from it at the same time. I read a while ago that INFJs are the kinds of people who, instead of looking from, what was it, the outside in, they look from the inside out. And yes, they look from the inside out instead of the outside in, which is what an INFP would do, but an INFJ does it kind of like in a different order. And so what this means is that they'll take everything that is going on and they'll be able to, due to various situations and seeing patterns, thanks to their other functions, they're able to predict certain outcomes that end up happening. And which is why they often get the term as psychics, or at least there's the joke about them being psychics. It's not so much that they're psychics, it's just that they're so adept at being able to predict people's actions or society's actions that when they demonstrate this ability, people are like, how did you know? I didn't even know that. What is going on? How? What? And this is generally seen as a trait of INFJs where they're able to do this, able to predict outcomes happening within society, within groups, and be able to maneuver in ways to, at least if they're healthy, bring about a better situation, a better group dynamic, helping a person grow, helping a person achieve something. In some ways, an INFJ is very similar to an INTJ. It's just what they look at is kind of different. So, whereas an INTJ may not necessarily look at the people or society, the INFJ definitely will look at the people or society. I'm not saying that the INTJ can't. It's just I'm saying that the INFJ is more prone to be more people and society focused than an INTJ is. So, with that being said, a INFJ's usual goal, from what I know of them, are the basic essence of trying to bring about a better society to match an ideal that they believe in. And this is why, if they're really bad, I shouldn't need to mention any names because, kind of a downer. So if they're really bad, bad things can happen. But if they're really good, then really good things can happen. And if they're just kind of like in the middle, maybe they just affect their surroundings. And there's nothing wrong with that either. INFJs are also typically very reserved, much like the INFP, and oftentimes those two get confused quite easily. A lot of people mistake the INFJ for an INFP, and sometimes vice versa, and then sometimes the INFJ isn't actually an INFJ, they're an ENFJ, and it gets super complicated, and you don't know what to do with yourself when you're like trying to figure it all out. So there's that. But part of the reason behind this is that they can be both super reserved, but they can also be super social due to their desire to change the surroundings that they're in or the people that they're working with. And because of this desire to essentially better a person or better society, they can appear to be ENFJs when they're not. That is why that mix-up happens. Beyond that, INFJs are, aside from being very reserved, they don't much like the INFP, they don't like to open up parts of themselves to others, and they're actually, from what I've heard, a little more hesitant to open parts of themselves to other people than an INFP is. I don't know how true this is, just something I read. INFJs can let me know down below whether or not this is accurate, that they typically have a harder time opening up to other people, like fully opening up to other people, because there's this thing inside of them that keeps them naturally distant from others while also not being distant. It's an interesting dynamic, being both distant and not distant. It's almost like a paradox, yet that is apparently that which is an INFJ. Beyond that, INFJs are also extremely friendly, or can be extremely friendly, but they can also be extremely forgetful and extremely oblivious to their surroundings. But I'm almost uncertain about this because INFJs have extroverted sensing, which would make one believe that they have better sense for fashion, better sense for what's going around in the present, better sense for that stuff. So I would almost say that an INFP is a little more klutzy than an INFJ, but that's a story for another time. Because of their extroverted sensing, INFJs, much like the INTJs and anyone else who has extroverted sensing, is they're able to bring themselves to enjoy certain bits, but they're also able to use this as seeing what's happening in the present to once again weird people out with their predictions that usually always end up coming true. Wow, that was an unintentional stutter. I was trying to say that one word, but anyways, so they often will go towards. Sometimes they'll correct it, sometimes they won't, but the general phrase of an INFJ is usually, yep, saw that coming. What else is new? Part of the negative sides of an INFJ is that, I already said, they're reserved, but they can also have, I would say, a cold disposition towards people sometimes. I'm not saying this is all the time. I'm not saying this is with every INFJ. Some INFJs can probably be the most friendly people you will ever meet, but depending on where the INFJ is in their life, it can often be a negative thing where they can appear cold to other people, although they may not want to. It's just through stressful situations that may happen. One other thing is that INFJs, perhaps even more so than INFPs, is they have a tendency, because they're so good at predicting outcomes and helping people out and doing all these wonderful things, they often end up unintentionally becoming people's therapist, because they're able to see so there's a image as to what Ni versus Nai is. Ni is like an expanding spider's web, whereas where Nai is like a spider web that goes down to a singular point. So Nai, with them, especially INFJs, with them having all these things that they then narrow down into a singular focus, they're able to see everything the person is telling them, and thus naturally end up helping them out, thus naturally becoming a therapist when they had no intention of being one for that person. Although with their friends and family, they may end up doing this. Now, the thing there is that an INFJ won't necessarily notice it, because as an INFP myself, I don't exactly notice that all the time, that, oh yeah, my knee is, doing this. Unless an INFJ is super focused on MBTI, or at least understands the MBTI and is a bit self-aware, they don't usually think that, oh yeah, it works like this, where it goes bunch of stuff out here and then narrow down like a funnel into like the prime issue that might be happening. I don't know how many INFJs think of it like that, but some of the more self-aware ones might. I'm just throwing that out there. With that being said, the INFJs are perhaps one of the most loyal types out there, and should you gain their loyalty, they'll typically stick around you for a long time. If you don't gain their loyalty, well, I mean, you might remain acquaintances. You might never talk to them again. It's just, it takes a while for an INFP to give someone their loyalty. Years at least. An INFP, perhaps it takes less time for an INFP to be loyal to someone, but once they do give their loyalty, it is as strong, or if not as stronger than an INFJ's. But an INFJ just typically needs a little bit more time to give a person that loyalty. Perhaps because they're testing out all the patterns, perhaps they're testing out all the things that can happen, perhaps they're testing out whether they can truly trust the person. There are so many variables with INFJs that you can't really know. And this is also part of the reason why INFJs can remain so mysterious, is because of that factor that they keep so much of themselves private, much like the INFP, which once again leads to the confusion between the two. It's just why the INFJ leaves things private and why the INFP leaves things private are usually typically two completely different reasons. So I guess with that being said, one last thing, INFJs are also can be very goofy. They can let them, and this is probably due to the times when they're able to let themselves relax. They can be very silly, very goofy, very on the ball with things, and perhaps maybe a little weirded out when they run into a knee user, but you know, that dynamic can work and cause some fun to happen. So with that being said, that is it for this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.